Welcome to our discussion today of ambivalence toward vows. In our parsha this week, Parsha Ki Tetze, we find the beginning of this ambivalence. On the one hand, encourages us to pay our vows on time. Lo ta'cher l'shalamo. On the other hand, it says, Chi techda lindor lo yeh b'chachet. If you fail to vow, there'll be no sin. There's no problem in not making vows. On the other hand, whatever you vow, you should keep. Are vows positive or are vows negative? We have a Gemara in Nedarim that says, anyone who makes a vow, even if he fulfills it, he's still considered a sinner. Very questionable whether we need to make vows at all. Similarly, in the book of Kohelet, we find Tov asher lo tidor, meshitidor v'lo teshalem. Best that you should not vow, rather than that you should vow and not pay. In fact, in the Sifri and also in the Midrash Rabbah, we have a debate. The best thing would be if you didn't vow at all. And there's another opinion in the Sifri that if you vow and you kept your vow, that's the best of all. The Rambam maintains this ambiguity by mentioning that, well, there are circumstances under which you might want to vow for having trouble with certain passions of your own. But nonetheless, if you fail to vow, that would be fine. He says as follows. Anyone who vows, it's like you're making a false bama, an altar, an unnecessary altar. It's best to avoid making vows at all. But if you're making a vow for a mitzvah, it's a great idea, the great value of paying your vows to God. The Rambam, the Parsha this week in Kohelet, an ambivalence toward making vows. We find that somehow the idea of vows is very important in terms of the conquest of the land of Israel, and therefore is found toward the end of all of the ending books of the Torah, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. In the Vayikra, we have a pasuk, Kol cherem asher yachram min adam. It says as follows, Min adam lo yipadem ot yumat, any vows that you make against people, Kol asher yacharim ish l'Hashem mikol asher lo me'adam be'emam yisdech uzato lo yimacher v'lo yigael kol cherem kodesh kashimu l'Hashem. One of the last verses in Vayikra, the notion of that which is vowed, and that which is made cherem and holy, sanctified to God, should be treated as such. Bamidbar, one of the last parshiot, matot, dealing with vows, and here we have this verse as well, as Moshe prepares the Jews for the land of Israel. But there's a particular connection of vows for wars, preparing for war. The Medrash says that when Yaakov made a vow, as he went out in his battles against Lavan, it says, Lemor L'Dorot, he said, Yaakov taught us a lesson for all generations. You know, dream, Beit Saratan. Whenever there's a tzara, whenever there's a difficult straits, you should always make a vow. Yaakov did so, and it's necessary and important to do so in general. But Midrash also points out that Daled Hem Shenadru, 4 people made vows in Tanakh, 2 Nadru V'Efsidu, they've made vows and they lost out. 2 Nadru V'Nistakru, 2 made vows and they benefited. Yaakov Nadar V'Efsid, Yaakov made a neder, but he wasn't able to fulfill it. Yiftach Nadar V'Efsid, Yiftach, Jephthah made a vow, he wasn't able to fulfill, but Chana did well and Israel did well. When did Israel do well? In their very first battle. Vayidar Yisrael neder limor. Israel vowed a vow, it says in Parshat Chukat. If God will give me this first victory after Aaron's death, then they will give the whole city to God. So I'd like to suggest that in first wars, we declare everything for God. Some strange way, Amalek is the first war forced upon us, and everything that they have is not for us to touch. And this in Chukat, the very first battle after the death of Aaron, We made a vow as a people, and we gave it away to God. Who was that first battle? Was it Amalek, or was it Sichon? Was it who was it? A little bit unclear. But first battles we give to God. Why the first? It's like Truma. It's like the first of our fruits we give to God. What about Yoshua? Yoshua took that very first battle of Jericho, Yericho, and he declared that it's Cherem Lashem, that everything there was to go to God. Was that good, or wasn't it good? The Radak on Yehoshua says that, well, he must have, if he gave it all to God, if he declared everything there ban, God must have told him to do so, even though the verses don't say so. But in fact, he acknowledges that the Chazal, that the rabbis say, that God agreed with Yoshua, that God did not come up with this idea of vowing all the spoils of Jericho to God, but God agreed with it. We don't find that God commanded Joshua to make a cherem out of the city of Jericho. Yoshua said it on his own, but we know that God agreed, because when Achan went against the vow, God said, Chata Yisrael, Israel has sinned by going against this vow. If you do make a vow, you must keep it. However, there is a Rashi, and there is a Gemara, an opinion in the Gemara, that indeed Joshua made a vow which was not correct and was not a good idea. As Rashi says, you should not have done that. It's your fault, Joshua, that the very first battle was tainted with the taking of the spoils, because you never should have vowed, because through that vow, Achan sinned and the Jewish people sinned, and the very first battle of Israel was ruined. You, Yehoshua, brought this ruin to us by bringing in the idea of a vow. And I want to go a step further. Joshua not only spoiled things by forbidding the spoils, but also, at the same time, the Gemara there in Sanhedrin, also in Eruvin, points out that Yehoshua, not only did he make a vow, which he did not have to make, he forbade something that didn't have to be forbidden, and as a result, Achan took from the spoils, and the Jewish people sinned, and the first battle was ruined. Not only that, but at the very same time, Joshua was not doing what he was supposed to do. He was mivatel. He prevented them from doing pirya v'rivya. He prevented the Jews from being with their husbands and wives. He prevented Talmud Torah. He didn't study enough Torah during the battles. And Tamid, the Korban Tamid, he didn't bring the daily offering during these battles. So at the same time, he didn't do what he was commanded to do. He was creating his own problems, his own new mitzvot, his own new vows. And this is the problem of vows. We have so many mitzvot in the Torah. We need to add more mitzvot. We need to create more obstacles for ourselves to fail. Indeed, sometimes it works out. Chana worked out very well with Shmuel. Yaakov, perhaps. But in the end, if we would just avoid the sins, if we would just do what we need to do, that would be the best. The message of the Torah, the message of this pasuk, the message of Yehoshua, according to this interpretation, is, you know what we need to do? We need to do what we have to do. We already have many obligations. Don't take on more than you can accept. Don't take on additional commandments. Focus on the commandments that we have. If we do that, lo yeh v'chachet, we'll not have a sin. And hopefully, our next battles, our next major battles that we need to fight, we'll be able to make them. And lo yeh v'chachet, we'll not have that sin of additional burdens which we need not place on ourselves. And indeed, we'll be victorious. I'd like to thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfar Beth Elameth congregation. If you'd like to email me at any time, Rabbi Joel M. Finkelstein, rabbijmf@gmail.com. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz for making today's production possible. Thank you.